My fusion system. Fusing 1,000 chickens at the start. Chapters 271 to 285. Chapter 271. The Adventurers Association. Am I dreaming? Clyde sat up abruptly and rubbed his eyes. He was entirely oblivious to his injuries. He grimaced in pain due to the movement, but the ache in his body was not as severe as the shock in his heart. When he first encountered Watson, he had only felt that youth was mysterious. He had been unaware of the youth's strength. He had even made a point of observing him. There were no changes in the youth's combat aura. It was apparent that he had not trained. However, the youth could kill a monster that even he could not handle. Was it not annoying to employ them as bodyguards when they were that powerful? Who was protecting whom? It was not only Clyde, but Arthur and the others also struggled to get to their feet. Their faces were filled with surprise as they looked at the dark liquid that appeared on the ground after the evil eye monster exploded. It was particularly true for Arthur. Apart from shock, his eyes glowed with anxiety. He had not anticipated Watson, who he wanted to take hostage, to be so powerful. Fortunately, the captain intervened just in time. If he was truly determined to forsake Watson, well, Arthur shivered subconsciously as he glanced at the liquid on the ground. He had the distinct impression that his fate would be no better than that of the evil eye monster in front of him. Nightingale, clean up the scene. The body fluid of that evil eye monster is too smelly. Watson clapped his hands casually after he crushed the evil-eyed monster with one foot. He turned around and moved in front of Clyde and the others, waving his hand at Nightingale. He helped them up and asked with concern, "Are you okay, young Master Watson? Who are you?" Clyde felt a warm flow from Watson's hands into his body once he stood up. It was the combat aura, which flowed like a river, healing his wounds and aiding in his recovery, that caused him to address Watson with the honorific title instinctively. He was aware that the teenager in front of him was an elite stronger than him. He must be a silver tier warrior, at least, and possibly even gold tier. So young and yet so powerful meant that he was not an ordinary person. Please allow me to reintroduce myself. My name is Watson, and I'm from the border. I'm here to enroll at the Royal Academy. The Royal Academy? Clyde's face lit up as he heard that. The Royal Academy was the finest institution in the kingdom. It attracted only geniuses under the age of 18 and served as a focal point for the kingdom's greatest talents. Many individuals wished to be a part of it. Given that the child in front of him was a freshman at the Royal Academy, his strength was unsurprising. However, the boundary was the kingdom's most isolated location. It had been a long time since a genius was admitted to the Royal Academy. Not even the City of Steel had such a talent, let alone somewhere from the border. Furthermore, based on his attire and manner, Watson appeared to be the descendant of great nobility, perhaps the Border Count. He asked, "Are you related to the Border Count, young Master Watson?" "There's no special relationship. We just live together," Watson replied casually. His inadvertent words sent a tremendous tsunami through Clyde's heart. He must have meant that they were very close. Who else could live with the Border Count? Other than the maids and servants in residence, Watson could only be a relative of Sylvan. Based on his age, Watson was very likely to be Sylvan's son. It's not strange for the Border Count's son to have such a talent. While Clyde was guessing, the other two adventurers shouted from the side. "Hey, how long do you want to talk? This area is still unsafe. I believe we should go now. Indeed, it's more important to go out first. Young Master Watson, do you have any way to take us up?" Watson took no action in response to his words. He fixed his gaze on Nightingale, who was cleaning the ground. "Nightingale, that's good enough. Please take us up." "Yes, young Master Watson," Nightingale responded respectfully. She clapped her palm gently above her head at the passage. The tunnel collapsed with a loud boom as a result of the strong vibration. A massive hole punctured the ground, connecting it to the sky. Sunlight streamed through the hole, illuminating everyone's wide-open jaws. An adventurer's voice could be barely heard from above. "Who are you? Why are you so unruly? Why are you stealing the monsters from the lower levels? If you are so powerful, don't bully the monsters on levels lower than 10. Continue to the 30th or 40th level." Everyone there exchanged glances when they heard that. They fixed their gazes on Nightingale and stayed silent for an extended period. They were at least 100 meters away from the ground, but Nightingale had penetrated the ground with a single palm strike. What level of strength was that? Watson's stomp on a gold-tier monster had been enough to shock them. However, at that moment, Nightingale's action was even more terrifying. When Clyde watched that scene from the side, he swallowed his saliva. His guess about Watson as the border count's son was purely speculative. At that moment, he was positive that Watson was the border count's son. Otherwise, which noble on the border would have such a formidable bodyguard? Clyde and the others sat on the ground 20 minutes after exiting the underground maze, greedily enjoying the sunlight. There was a lingering fear as they reflected on their recent underground adventure. The two adventurers from the Holy Sword Adventurer team, who had nearly averted death, continued to nod and express their gratitude to Watson, stating that they would inform their leader about the incident. Then, they limped away in unison. "Everyone, the matter has been resolved. It is now time for us to leave. Kindly do not tell anyone about what had occurred in the underground city. After all, I am merely a student en route to the royal city. I am trying to avoid causing too much trouble." Watson gave Clyde and the others a wink. Just as he was about to lead Nightingale back to the carriage parked outside the basin, Clyde abruptly jumped up and walked in front of Watson, frantically extending his hands. "Wait, young Master Watson. You saved our lives. We haven't thanked you properly for such a big favor. If you leave, we'll feel guilty." "That's right, young Master Watson. We received your money and assured you that we would escort you to the City of Steel. We haven't done it yet. As adventurers, our credibility is paramount." Annie rose to her feet, approached Watson, and hugged his arm. It was as though she were clutching a priceless treasure. "Young Master Watson is only passing by the City of Steel. He won't stay here for long." Nightingale coughed and discreetly separated Annie and Watson. "Then you'd require our assistance even more. We are very familiar with the city. We know where the best food is, where the most comfortable hotels and cheapest are." Annie rubbed her aching arm. She did not dare to be angry at Nightingale. Then, she continued to speak enthusiastically. "The best place in the City of Adventurers is the Golden Feather Pavilion. It is the ideal location in the city, where entertainment and rest are integrated into one. If you visit the City of Steel but do not see the Golden Feather Pavilion, it is the same as if you did not come. However, to enter the Golden Feather Pavilion, you should go to the Adventurers Association to do a strength assessment first, young Master Watson. The Golden Feather Pavilion has one rule: the strong shall rule. It means the stronger you are, the better the treatment you will receive. A strong individual such as yourself will undoubtedly receive the best care." The Adventurers Association? Strength assessment? What's that? Watson was a little puzzled. "Haven't you heard about that, young Master Watson? The City of Steel is one of the largest gathering places for adventurers in the kingdom. Due to a comprehensive adventurer system in this town, anyone interested in forming an adventurer team must take a test at the Adventurers Association. Following the test, the association will assign a level nameplate to the team based on the result. For example, we are a bronze tier adventurer team." Then, she took out a bronze nameplate from her chest. It was inscribed with the word, bronze. The adventurer and professional ranking systems are regarded as the kingdom's two most powerful systems. Each citizen is required to take a test and register themselves. The nameplate issued after the test is equivalent to a person's identity certificate. With that, not only will you receive preferential treatment in the City of Steel, but also in every city in the kingdom. Chapter 272. A Test of Strength. Outside the City of Steel. The city walls, formed like iron barrels, flickered with a metallic luster. A closer inspection revealed that those city walls were not composed of metal. Instead, they were embedded with different colored nameplates, such as bronze, silver, and gold. Those nameplates formerly belonged to elites from various adventurer teams. After their deaths, their nameplates were molded onto the city walls, turning them into a unique monument. The city wall was adorned with nameplates, demonstrating the city's enthusiasm for adventure. Watson was successfully enticed to enter the Adventurers Association after Annie's introduction. Nightingale drove the carriage slowly into the City of Steel. Meanwhile, Clyde and the others were in charge of negotiating with and paying the guards at the gate. When Watson realized that Clyde and the others were injured, he wanted them to sit in the carriage while he walked. Finally, Clyde and the others were adamant about it, so he had no choice but to return to the carriage. He observed the countryside via the carriage window, which was in stark contrast to the border. He also saw many adventurers that went past the carriage. Then, Watson asked, "Why is there an Adventurers Association in the City of Steel, Master?" Additionally, adventurers must pass a ranking test each year. I have never heard of this while we were at the border. The border is like a pool of stagnant water. Sylvan made numerous sacrifices to rule the border. As I've already stated, the Holy Dragon Kingdom is enormous and magnificent. I brought you here to experience it for yourself. Antonio's arms were wrapped around the Diamond World tree staff, which had been disguised to appear ordinary. He rested his back against the carriage and closed his eyes. "Watson, I heard that you just entered the most famous underground city in the City of Steel, the Labyrinth. Did you show your strength in front of outsiders?" "Yes, Master. I had to show my strength because we encountered a gold-tier magical beast. If I didn't do anything, others would have died," Watson replied carefully. After they left the border, he had to hide his strength, and Antonio also warned him to be careful. He did not know if his actions would make his master angry. Using your strength to protect others is not a bad thing. You have seen many ruins on the border. How does that underground maze feel compared to what you know? Watson heaved a sigh of relief when he realized that Antonio did not care about that. "I think the underground maze is more of a training ground than a ruin. It includes a reward mechanism. That is different from everything I know. I think that the underground city is man-made, perhaps like when he had fused the ruins. It is as I had expected, Watson. You are my most outstanding disciple. You immediately saw through the labyrinth." "That's right, that maze was man-made. It was created by the founding emperor, Landhar I. Its purpose was to train the people in the kingdom, including the reward system set up in the maze's deepest levels. We are not making a hasty visit to the royal city but to cultivate. The underground city is your first trial. We will stay here until you pass it before we set off again." "Yes, Master, I understand." Watson nodded in understanding. He was a platinum-tier elite. Regular training would not have any effect on him. Since his master said that the underground maze was helpful for his training, it must have been beneficial. "Today, I went down more than 10 levels in the underground city and encountered an evil gold-tier magical beast. I heard that the entire maze has 100 levels. I don't know about the difficulties down there. I feel like I don't have complete confidence in passing this test." The late king who created that underground maze must have been an impressive elite. Don't you think that only the current Sword Saint could have successfully navigated that underground city since its inception? "Of course, it's very difficult." Antonio smiled. He turned his head and spoke softly where Watson could not see him. "What's going on? What's in the labyrinth that could rattle a little monster like Watson?" "I've been there before, but there's nothing special there. I only let Watson go down because the things at the bottom levels would be useful to him." "Did something change while I was away?" 10 minutes later, at the Adventurers Association. The Adventurers Association was located on the City of Steel's main road. As soon as they arrived, they could almost see it. The entire structure was composed of a cluster of spiky structures. A giant sign, Adventurers Association, was hung in front of the door, and an endless stream of adventurers entered and exited the building. A stretch of a courtyard surrounded the Adventurers Association. There were lovely decorations throughout the space, such as a fountain garden in the yard, as well as huge open spaces for duels. At the moment, a significant number of magnificent carriages were parked at the association's entrance. Numerous silver and even gold-tier monsters were used to pull the carriages. Watson's carriage was not conspicuous among those gorgeous carriages. "Young Master Watson, we have arrived at the Adventurers Association." Clyde assisted Watson in exiting the carriage. Nightingale, Denise, and Antonio also got down from the carriage. "Let me introduce you to my master." After exiting the carriage, Watson introduced Antonio to the entire group. Clyde and the others did not dare to ignore him. They hurriedly bowed respectfully to greet him. Watson was already a force to be reckoned with. How powerful was his master? With that thought in mind, they observed Antonio thoroughly. They discovered that his master was actually quite young. Additionally, he appeared to be asleep. He was so handsome that he did not look like a human. Plus, he seemed to be somewhat familiar. However, they had no idea where they had previously seen that individual. "Do not just stand there like a fool. Let's go in for the test." Watson prodded him as he noticed that Clyde and the others were staring at Antonio. He was not worried that others would recognize his teacher. After all, he had changed so much that even those closest to him might not recognize him. Watson entered the Adventurers Association's hall, slightly excited. It was densely packed with many other adventurers. Women in black gauze and exposed clothing, while muscular men wore heavy armor. It was the first time he had encountered such a fresh sensation since he transmigrated to that world. "Young Master Watson, if you want to test your strength, please come over here. There's a counter here. I recommend that you establish an adventurer team after this test. If you think that it's too troublesome, you can join our adventurer team. We've wanted to rise from bronze to silver tier for a long time. I'll be satisfied with silver tier, let alone gold tier." Annie held Watson's hand affectionately as she pulled him toward the counter. Then, Clyde interrupted with a solemn expression. "Annie, don't be ridiculous. Don't you know young Master Watson's identity? Why would he join our adventurer team?" As he spoke, he glanced at Watson with faint anticipation. "Joining your adventurer team doesn't appear to be all that bad. After all, I lack the time to manage my own adventurer team." "It's decided then." Watson massaged his chin as he nodded in agreement. "Yay, long live young Master Watson. With you, the Blood Rose adventurer team can finally be promoted." Annie cheered excitedly in front of the counter. Her speech displeased a slender, silver-haired man who was also queuing in front of the counter. "Blood Rose? Isn't that a bronze-tier adventurer team? An insignificant bronze-tier adventurer team dares to make a ruckus here? What a disgrace. If I were you, I'd get the hell out of here right now." Chapter 273. Absolute Reflection. "Who are you? Why are you speaking so arrogantly?" Annie shook her head and fixed her gaze on the man in front of her. The silver-haired skinny man's lips twisted in mockery in response to her question. He extended his hand and pointed at the intersection of the two blades on his chest. "I am the vice captain of the Holy Sword Adventurer Team, the largest adventurer team in the City of Steel. My name is Claude. Do you know who I am now? The Holy Sword Adventurer Team? Vice Captain?" Annie's face paled, and her voice started to tremble. "Is the Holy Sword Adventurer Team very powerful? It seems that the two people we saved in the dungeon are also members of the Holy Sword Adventurer Team," Watson whispered. Clyde's expression darkened as he said, "We can't say that they are powerful, but they are the largest gold-tier adventurer team in the entire City of Steel because their captain is the Sword Mistress, Christina von Frederick." "Who is the Sword Mistress?" Watson became intrigued at hearing the name of the Holy Sword Adventurer Team as Clyde appeared to be in awe. "Young Master Watson, you haven't heard of the Lady Sword Mistress?" It was Clyde's turn to be surprised. "I haven't heard of her at all. The Sword Mistress is..." Just as Clyde was about to explain, Antonio, who had been sitting beside Watson and resting with his eyes closed from the moment he got off the carriage, suddenly said, "If my guess is correct, the Sword Mistress is the young miss of the current Sword Saint family. The Frederick family is the most famous Sword Saint family in the entire Holy Dragon Kingdom." "That's right, Miss Christina is their only daughter. She's already a peak gold tier warrior at the age of 20. Furthermore, she's not an ordinary peak gold tier warrior. Her strongest battle record is defeating 20 gold tier at the same time. That's why she's known as the Sword Mistress. Many people in the kingdom think that she will surpass her father someday. She has also established the Holy Sword Adventurer Team. What is the daughter of a great Sword Saint family doing in such a remote place like the City of Steel? Was she here for the labyrinth as well?" Watson thought as he stroked his chin. Antonio had said that only one Sword Saint had managed to clear the dungeon since the labyrinth's establishment. That swordswoman might be there to challenge her father's record. While he was contemplating, Claude, who had introduced himself as the Holy Sword Adventurer Team's vice captain, scoffed at them. "It appears that the Blood Rose Adventurer Team is not only low tier, but you are also a group of country bumpkins. Who hasn't heard of our captain? Our team has already conquered the underground city's 70th floor. Our captain discovered a treasure on the 70th floor and advanced to the platinum tier the day before yesterday. I am here to change our team's ranking. The Holy Sword Adventurer Team will become the City of Steel's first platinum tier adventurer team." "Advanced to the platinum tier?" Claude's statement stunned the Blood Rose Adventurer Team members and the other adventurer teams around them. Everyone looked at Claude. Their eyes widened in surprise. The Sword Mistress was only 20 years old, but she had already achieved platinum tier elite status at a young age. Her abilities were comparable to the present Sword Saint. She would undoubtedly become a Diamond Tier elite in the future. The Holy Sword Adventurer team would also be the first Platinum Tier Adventurer team in the city. The city's strongest adventurer team had been a mere Gold Tier team. One of the criteria used to determine an adventurer team's level was the strength of the strongest person on the team. Platinum Tier elites were held in high regard across the Holy Dragon Kingdom. Typically, such an elite would not organize an adventurer team in a remote location. There were relatively few ladies who were independent and maverick, such as the Sword Mistress. Claude's expression subconsciously changed to smug in response to the envious gazes from his surroundings. Thanks to the Swordmistress's assistance, their adventurer team had always been the largest in the City of Steel. With the Swordmistress's Platinum Tier advancement, their team had grown even stronger. His position as vice captain would also improve. Even a Gold Tier elite had to be respectful in front of him. As a peak Silver Tier fighter, he would not usually have the chance to enjoy such treatment. The Holy Sword Adventurer team's promotion to Platinum Tier can't be announced so casually. We must use a special and impressive method to show the strength of our team. Claude pondered it, and his gaze became filled with malice as he stared at Annie. Normally, he would react as if he had spotted a bug when he encountered someone like Annie. He would disregard her obliviously. That day, though, was different. He could not wait for someone to provoke and establish the Holy Sword Adventurer team's authority. However, only a few people would dare to provoke the Holy Sword Adventurer team. Well, if no one would do it, then he would start it. It just so happened that he was annoyed with Annie. He would use the unremarkable Blood Rose Adventurer team as a stepping stone for establishing the Holy Sword Adventurer team's supreme status in the City of Steel. Claude aimed his finger at Annie once he made up his mind. You were causing a stir in the Adventurers Association just now. I told you to get lost. Didn't you hear me? Annie bit her lips, clearly enraged. She scanned around for help, but everyone there who felt her gaze kept silent. Claude was thrilled with her response. Not only do you have to get out of here, but you also have to kneel and apologize to me sincerely. The Adventurers Association's air is filthy because of you country bumpkins. I am going to count to 3. If you do not kneel and apologize, the Blood Rose Adventurer team will be expelled from the City of Steel today. 3, 2, I got it. Can't I just apologize? Annie's face was flushed with embarrassment. She bent her legs and was about to kneel on the ground. She was a courageous woman. She would rather die than apologize if she were the only one there. However, her team members and their benefactor, Watson, were behind her. She was adamant about not involving them. After all, the Holy Sword Adventurer team was too powerful. Their members numbered in the tens of thousands, and their captain was a Platinum Tier elite. She thought that Watson and the others were formidable too, but they had not yet achieved the Platinum Tier. Just as Annie was about to kneel, a slender hand grabbed her shoulder and helped her up. Miss Annie, we're here to test our strength. We just need to do what we're here to do. We don't need to worry about others finding fault with us for no apparent reason. But Annie was still hesitating when Claude, who was next to her, said fiercely, Brat, who are you saying is finding fault with you? Is there anyone else troubling us around here? Watson deliberately looked around him and laughed. At first, I heard that the Holy Sword Adventurer team is the largest team in the City of Steel. Their captain is the daughter of the current Sword Saint family, a Platinum Tier elite. I do admire that adventurer team. Now, it seems like the Holy Sword Adventurer team is merely average. If this is their vice captain, I'm guessing the rest of their team members are not much better. How disappointing. Brat, it's fine if you slander me, but you dare slander the Holy Sword Adventurer team and our captain? Are you courting death? Watson's bare mocking words inflamed Clyde's rage. He rushed toward Watson and raised his right hand, which was encircled by a flaming red combat aura, in an attempt to strike Watson in the face. Clyde was a fire elemental peak Silver Tier warrior. The power in his palm was enough to melt several layers of steel plates. If it had landed on Watson's body, it would melt his bones. Many adventurer teams around him turned their heads away. They could not bear to watch it. At that moment, bang, a shocking scene occurred. Clyde's palm landed on Watson's face with a muffled sound, but Watson was unscathed. On the contrary, someone appeared to have punched Clyde in the face. It distorted and became charred black. He screamed in pain as he spun around and flew more than 10 meters backward. He crashed into the wall, creating a deep pit. The entire Adventurers Association fell silent upon seeing that scene. Chapter 274. The Swordmistress arrives. Claude attacked someone else but was sent flying. Am I seeing things? A member of an adventurer team standing in line rubbed his eyes and muttered to himself. Another adventurer said, I saw it too. Claude did not become the Holy Sword's vice-captain because of his strength but his extraordinary skills. However, he is still a Fire Elemental Peak Silver Tier warrior. How could that youth send him flying without moving an inch? How strong is he? One by one, the adventurers began to discuss among themselves. Their eyes filled with reverence as they looked at Watson. The Blood Rose Adventurer team members were not particularly surprised because they had seen Watson in action. They quickly reacted, especially Annie. She held Watson's hand worriedly as she tried to walk out. Young Master Watson, you've caused a huge problem. The Holy Sword is influential all over the city, and you've just beat up their vice-captain. They will not let that matter rest. I think we still have the time to leave the city if we move now. On her way back to the City of Steel, she heard that Captain Clyde suspected Watson was the Border Count's son. However, they were not at the border, and the Swordmistress's father, the Sword Saint, would not be afraid of the Border Count. We haven't done the strength test yet. We'll leave after we complete the test. Watson gently broke away from Annie's grip and walked to the counter as she looked at him worriedly. The adventurers in the queue made way for him. When he approached the counter, he locked his gaze on the two young ladies behind it, who seemed terrified. Watson had a sweet smile that was unique to only him. Sisters, I am interested in being a member of the Blood Rose Adventurer team. Additionally, I would like to do a new strength assessment of our team. Is that okay? Of course, sure. You must first complete a form and register your details. Following that, one of our staff members will conduct a battle test with you. Your combat level will determine your adventurer team's level. Of course, when fighting with the staff, you might choose to fight in a team. Adventurers are more inclined to fight in a group than they are to fight alone. I understand. Then, I'll choose to fight as a team. Watson nodded in response and quickly filled out the form. Then, he waved to Clyde and the others behind him. It's time for the test. Everyone, come here quickly. Young Master Watson, why are we still here for the test? It'll be too late when the Holy Sword Adventurer team members arrive if we don't leave now. Arthur could not refrain from saying that. He seemed anxious. Even though it was good that the test could increase their team's level, it was not as important as their lives. If the Holy Sword Adventurer team members caught them, it was very likely that they would lose their lives. Where would you go? None of you will be able to leave today, Claude growled as he wiped the fresh blood on his charred face. Watson had used the Angel Race's special ability, Absolute Reflection, on Claude that sent him flying backward. He had crawled out of the ruined wall in a pitiful state. He clapped his hands as soon as he finished speaking. Clap, clap. More than 10 adventurers appeared outside the Adventurers Association in response to a muffled sound. Their white armor had the Holy Sword's crossmark on their chests, and they radiated with the ferocity of a Silver Tier warrior. A blue-haired adolescent led the group. Additionally, he had the aura of a Gold Tier warrior. Even his armor was unique. 2 unique Holy Swords were carved on the breast of his golden armor. Captain of the Holy Sword's first unit, Blake, is here to greet you, Vice Captain. Is there anything I can do for you, Vice Captain? The blue-haired young man had a handsome face. He looked at Claude with narrowed eyes. Although he spoke respectfully, his eyes were casual, as if he did not care about Claude's status. It was understandable. Although Claude was the team's vice captain, his strength was only Silver Tier. The young man, on the other hand, was at the peak of the Gold Tier. He was unquestionably stronger, but he was in a lower position. Additionally, he was responsible for Claude's protection at all times. That was why he did not like Claude. In addition, he and Claude admired the Sword Mistress. As a result, he did not appear immediately even though he had seen what had happened in the Adventurers Association. Instead, he waited until Claude summoned him. Blake, these people from a small Bronze Tier adventurer team not only spoke rudely about the Holy Sword Adventurer team, but they also hit me. Go and inform Lady Swordmistress. Claude spat out a mouthful of blood. His expression twisted as he continued to say, I'm going to destroy the Blood Rose Adventurer team today. I understand. Blake nodded and waved his hand. One of the adventurers behind him immediately turned around and walked toward the street outside. No matter how happy he was when Claude made a fool of himself, the man was still the Holy Sword's vice-captain. His embarrassment meant an insult to the Holy Sword adventurer team, and that affected the team's reputation. He could not tolerate it. The Blood Rose adventurer team is just filth, trash at the bottom of the tier. Tremble to your heart's desire. You will repent for your crimes when our captain arrives. Claude laughed impudently, his laughter resonating throughout the Adventurers Association. It was as if he wanted to see the ugly expressions on Watson and the others' faces. However, he was startled when he realized that Watson was still expressionless. The young man simply waved his palm in Claude's direction. You are so irritating. You should remain silent. Bang! Claude flew more than 10 meters backward with a muffled sound. It was as if numerous galloping carriages had struck him. He landed on the wall that had just been smashed, widening the hole in the wall. He knelt on the ground and vomited blood. He looked miserable. Watson's actions made everyone in the entire Adventurers Association twitch their lips, including Blake and other people outside. It would have been reasonable if Watson had just attacked Claude in self-defense, but his actions at that moment were like a severe slap on the Holy Sword adventurer team's face. Kid, let go of our vice-captain. I'll fight you. Blake could not stand it anymore. He drew the longsword from his waist and strolled into the Adventurers Association. Just as he was about to fight Watson, he heard his companion call out from behind him. Lady Swordmistress is here. Lady Swordmistress is here? So soon? Blake was surprised. It had only been a few minutes since he sent someone to inform her. It would take longer than that before Lady Swordmistress received the news. Puzzled, Blake stepped back and said, Greetings, Lady Swordmistress. Then, he knelt on one knee respectfully. Greetings, Lady Swordmistress. The other adventurers also spoke one after another. They sounded respectful. Watson followed the crowd's gaze and scanned the area. He noticed a yellow-haired girl dressed in a simple robe entering the Adventurers Association. The girl swayed with her movements as she wore a tiny sword around her waist. Her eyes were as bright as the stars, her nose was straight, her lips were petite and delicate, and her fair skin was nearly translucent. Not only did she possess an extraordinary appearance, but she also had a piercing sword-like aura and crown-like shield on her head. Her entire demeanor was sharp and honorable. That was the Sword Mistress, Christina. As the Sword Mistress walked, the entire area fell silent. Only the crisp sound of boots slamming onto the floor was audible. The crowd's hearts pounded in response to the sound. Lord Swordmistress, you're finally here. These people from the Blood Rose adventurer team were rude to you just now. I tried to stop them, but they beat me up. Lord Swordmistress, please get justice for me. Claude rushed forward, rolling and crawling, and told the story of what had happened. Christina walked right by him toward Watson as if she could not hear him. Watson stiffened. Is this him? Christina opened her mouth, and the three little words sounded like an angel had uttered them. Yes, that's him. We encountered a strange change in the labyrinth just now. He was the one who saved us. Two adventurers with bandages wrapped around their bodies stood behind Christina. Due to Christina's overwhelming presence, no one else saw them before they spoke. I got it. Christina nodded and turned her head to look down at Watson. She was a woman, but she was more than 1.7 meters tall. Your name is Watson, right? That's right. Watson did not want to be outdone. He stared at Christina. He did not expect that the two adventurers he saved in the maze would look for their leader. He did not know whether Christina was there to thank him or if she wanted to punish him for what had happened to Claude. Of course, he was not afraid of either situation. Chapter 275. The Sword That Severed the Sky. Watson. Christina muttered his name. Then, she said something shocking under everyone's apprehensive gaze. Are you interested in joining the Holy Sword adventurer team? What? The Sword Mistress is inviting someone to join her adventurer team? Did I mishear her? An adventurer asked in surprise. The Sword Mistress, Christina, was famous for her pride in the City of Steel. As a result, the entry requirements for the Holy Sword adventurer team were extremely stringent. Numerous individuals who sought to join her team had been refused. Otherwise, the number of people in the Holy Sword adventurer team would have increased tenfold. No one had ever known her to extend a personal invitation to another person. Lady Swordmistress, are you sure you want me to join your team? Watson asked as he pointed at himself as if he did not hear her clearly. He thought Christina was there to punish him or to thank him for saving 2 members of her Holy Sword adventurer team. He did not expect she would invite him to join her team. It was not something he would ever imagine. Yes, you heard correctly. I would like to invite you to become a member of the Holy Sword adventurer team. We now have more than 50,000 members, and there are only less than 1 million people in the City of Steel. If you agree to join us, then I'll make you a vice captain. You have the authority to command those in your immediate vicinity. A vice captain? The crowd gasped. They had been pretty surprised when Christina invited Watson to join her team, but that had changed to shock after the Swordmistress's latest offer. If Watson joined her adventurer team, he could be promoted as the vice captain. What was that preferential treatment? Did Christina overestimate Watson's importance? Lady Swordmistress, if you allow that young man to become the vice leader, then Claude, who was standing on the side, asked nervously. Just demote yourself to an ordinary member, Claude. I remember telling you that an adventurer from the Holy Sword team must be upright, no matter what they do. But it seems like you don't want to listen to what I said. Virtue comes first, followed by ability, if one were to join the Holy Sword adventurer team. That is our creed, or have you forgotten about that? Christina tilted her head slightly and glared at Clyde sternly. The man's body trembled. It was as if he could not withstand the intense pressure in her eyes. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead. I did not forget, Lady Swordmistress. Everything I did was for the team. A poisonous seed can't bloom into a brilliant flower, just like how a wrong move will never get the right result. This time, I won't expel you from the team. Instead, I shall demote you. On account of your past contributions, you should go back and reflect on your actions. Blake, take him away and give him a lesson while you're at it. Yes, Lady Swordmistress. Blake rose to his feet in response to Christina's request and went in front of Clyde. He dragged him outdoors, holding his arms. Clyde struggled and shouted, Lady Swordmistress, everything I did was for the Holy Sword adventurer team's benefit. You can't treat me like this. Gradually, the voice grew weaker. Clyde was no match for Blake, especially after his serious injuries at the hands of Watson. No matter how hard he fought, it was in vain. Watson, I am aware of all that Clyde has done to you. The Holy Sword adventurer team is at fault here, and I am also to blame for not strictly disciplining my subordinates. I wonder if this offer would satisfy you, Christina asked after she had gotten rid of Claude. Miss Christina, since you have already punished Claude, let's put that subject to rest. I am sorry, but I cannot join the Holy Sword adventurer team since I have already pledged to join my friend's team. Really? That is truly regrettable. Christina's face was filled with unconcealed regret. That young man actually turned down the offer? Is that right? Is he a moron? Numerous adventurers in attendance expressed shock when they saw Watson's rejection. Christina had taken the initiative to invite Watson into her team, for Watson's sake. She had even offered a high price and punished Claude in front of him. Every step she took was sincere. Given Christina's identity and strength, few people in attendance would be able to resist that temptation. Numerous adventurers' lips quivered. They wanted to replace Watson, so they shouted, I am willing to join the Holy Sword adventurer team. Clyde's and the others' gazes were similarly wrought with conflicted emotions. They might not have had the courage to refuse if Christina had asked them. However, Watson, the young master they had just met, had rejected her because of them. They were moved and instinctively looked up to Watson. Of course, they might not have thought so if they had known what Watson was thinking. Watson did not join the Holy Sword adventurer team because he wanted to conceal his strength. If he joined the Holy Sword and was constantly exposed to platinum-tier elites, he might not be able to hide his secret. It would be easier to fool Clyde and the others. Is there anything else, Lady Swordmistress? If there's nothing else, we will continue with the Adventurers Association's test. Watson's words were implying to Christina that she should not bother him if there was nothing else. However, Christina did not leave. Instead, she looked contemplative. You have not taken the strength test? Well, then I can test you on behalf of the Adventurers Association. I don't think I'm overstepping my bounds by doing that, right? The second half of Christina's sentence was directed at the 2 ladies behind the counter. Of course, Miss Christina. With your strength, you are the best candidate to be the tester, the 2 counter ladies responded feebly. The test is a little tedious. Perhaps a wager, Watson? Let's bet on whether you can withstand a stroke of my sword. You won't need to join my team if you can do that, and I won't bother you again. But if you can't, then you'll take up the role as my vice captain. What do you think? Christina remarked unhurriedly, gently pressing her right hand against the slender sword at her belt. Watson smiled bitterly. Lady Swordmistress, I can agree to a duel, but I want to know one thing. Why are you so persistent with me? It was one thing for Christina to invite him to her team, but after he refused, she continued to pester him. Had she seen through his background? He noticed Christina took a big breath as he contemplated. The air entered her nose at a speed visible to the naked eye. I don't know. My gut says to keep you, and it has always been right. Well, let's not waste time. You should be careful of the next attack. My weapon is a platinum tier item that my father had given me. It is called the Sky-Severing Blade. The sword mistress took a stride toward Watson as soon as she finished speaking. She yanked her razor-sharp sword about an inch upward. The exposed blade emitted a cold light in all directions, shining so brightly that everyone there had to close their eyes. Christina retracted the blade just as everyone thought she would draw it. Watson squinted his eyes as he sensed a piercing cold sword aura that went straight at him. That sword aura was so swift that it transcended everything. It passed in front of him in an instant, snatching a strand of hair near his ear. What happened? Did Miss Christina not use her sword technique? The adventurers' conversations came from all directions. They had no idea what had occurred. They watched Christina draw a part of her sword and then sheathed it again. It appeared as though she made no move at all, and all of them had reservations about it. Crack! Suddenly, a crisp sound echoed from the Adventurers Association. Then, a straight line spread out and covered the entire Adventurers Association. It started at where Christina and Watson stood. Then, the Adventurers Association was split in half. On the damaged ceiling, a faint outline of blue sky and white clouds could be seen. There was a faint trace in the middle of the white clouds. The sword seemed to have cut through the building and soared toward the sky. That was the sword that severed the sky. Chapter 276. A Gold-Tier Adventurer. A few seconds after Christina severed the Adventurers Association, the young ladies behind the counter finally stood up. Their faces were filled with fear. The other adventurers also broke out in a cold sweat. Some of the timid ones had already fallen to the ground. Many of them had heard of the swordmistress's name, but that was the first time they had seen her attack. They had not expected her to be so terrifying. Was the young man named Watson? They were concerned about Watson after witnessing the power of Christina's blade. It could even cut the heavens into two. Watson was only a young man. Could he endure that move, or had his body already been divided in half? The Holy Sword Adventurer team will cover any damages today. I will arrange for someone to transfer the funds later. As for the bet, I will keep my promise and won't bother you anymore. Christina straightened her posture and placed her right hand on the table. Then, she walked away without looking back. Nobody paid Christina any attention. Everybody's eyes widened in surprise when they saw Watson. The young man appeared to be in good shape following the attack. He remained in the same position. Apparently, the sword energy could cut through anything in its way. It can't be. That young man managed to block the swordmistress's attack. The adventurers widened their eyes. The sword mistress had only just advanced to the platinum tier. Additionally, Watson took no action when he blocked the attack. He did not use any magic or martial arts skills. It was as if he had used his body to ward off the attack. What level was he supposed to be? Was he also a platinum tier elite? Watson appeared to be only 12 or 13 years old. Could he have been a platinum tier elite at that tender age? While everyone made guesses about him, Watson appeared helpless. The swordmistress's stroke merely caused cut off his hair. She did not hurt him. It was not because he had used any magic or skills to block that attack. He had worn the platinum tier armor he had crafted on Mount Creation. Ordinary platinum tier attacks would not be able to penetrate his defenses. He had intended to perform a gold tier spell so that he could block the swordmistress's blow, but barely. They would think that he was struggling. However, he forgot that his armor was not only platinum tier but they were made in Mount Creation. They were stronger than ordinary platinum tier items. It seemed like he had become even more unfathomable in everyone's hearts. Thank you for your mercy, Lady Swordmistress. Otherwise, I'm afraid that I would have been split into two. By the way, what is the result of my test? Watson only asked Christina after a long stretch of silence. He knew that he had already exposed his strength in front of Christina, so he needed to save the situation. So, she had been lenient with him, that was how he had won. I was right, Lady Swordmistress has just advanced to the Platinum tier. If she had used her Platinum tier strength to attack him, that youth would have definitely died. Lady Swordmistress must have controlled herself and reduced her strength to Gold tier or even Silver tier. Hearing that, Christina did not respond. The adventurers present all heaved a sigh of relief. They had suspected that Watson was a 12 or 13-year-old Platinum tier, but it looked like it was something they could debunk. A Platinum tier elite at such a young age? There was no precedent in the entire history of the Holy Dragon Kingdom. If Watson could do it, would that not mean he was even more talented than the Sword Mistress? It was too unrealistic. Watson, you must be Gold tier. I would not be surprised if you join a team and they eventually become a famous Gold tier adventurer team. Christina stopped and spoke without turning her head. Gold tier? For real? Miss Christina, you think too highly of me. Actually, I can accept Silver tier as well. Watson shouted again. Christina turned around. There was a complicated expression on her beautiful face. After a long look at Watson, she said, as you wish. Whether you believe you are Silver or Gold tier, my response is still the same. It won't change. Christina abruptly exited the Adventurers Association after replying to Watson. Blake and the others, who were controlling Claude, were behind her, left after they gazed at Watson. Regardless of how Christina controlled her strength, Watson was able to withstand her sword without a scratch. Additionally, Christina extended a cordial invitation to him to become the Holy Sword Adventurer team's vice-captain. Those 2 points were sufficient for all the Holy Sword members to remember Watson's name. The Adventurers Association rapidly resumed its lively mood following Christina's departure. The adventurers looked at Watson fiercely, some were even compelled to walk nearer to the young man. Someone asked enthusiastically, "Are you interested in joining our adventurer team, young Master Watson?" "We are a bronze tier adventurer team at its peak." Another person said, "We are even better. We are a team of silver tier adventurers. We simply lack an elite of your level, young Master Watson." They found it unusual when Christina cordially welcomed Watson into her group. Finally, they understood that she was a platinum tier elite with great taste. The young man was a genius, perhaps one of the best in the entire kingdom. With such a genius in one's adventurer team, would they need to worry about their ranking? Watson was under no obligation to react to those individuals. Annie had already extended her arms to shield Watson as she yelled, "All of you, get lost. We were the ones who discovered young Master Watson. He has already decided to join us." Even Clyde and the others acted to keep Watson away from the other adventurers. They wanted Watson to stay with them. They did that due to Watson's power and because he had declined Christina's offer. So, they saw him as one of their own. Watson approached the lady behind the counter and asked, oblivious to the commotion around him. "Miss Catherine has tested my strength. May I now join the Blood Rose team and get my identity token?" "Young Master Watson, this is your identity token. Please keep it well." The 2 females behind the desk exchanged adoring smiles. They removed a golden token engraved with a rose. The rose produced a faint crimson glow and steam as if it had just been carved with magic. Additionally, the word gold was printed on the back of the token. From now on, the Blood Rose Adventurer team will be officially promoted from bronze to gold tier. Gold is a little too high. Can't you promote us to silver tier instead? Watson made no attempt to remove the nameplate. Instead, he had a question. He thought that the gold tier was somewhat pretentious, particularly at his age. His words made the 2 young ladies' faces stiffen. They did not know how to respond to him. They had worked there for many years, but that was the first time they met an adventurer who did not wish to have a higher evaluation for his test. "I'm sorry, Mr. Watson. Miss Swordswoman has already stated that your strength is gold tier, which proves that she used gold tier swordsmanship. Furthermore, so many people had witnessed it. The Adventurers Association is an impartial organization, we would never cheat." When the other adventurers heard that, they looked at Watson with a strange expression. However, they did not pay too much attention to it. After a while, they started to quarrel again. "All right, gold tier it is then. Watson took the nameplate and hung it around his neck. He fiddled with it a few times and took a deep breath. No matter what, he was officially a gold-tier adventurer. He could find time to get to the underground maze and finish his master's mission. Chapter 277. The Frog at the Bottom of a Well. A massive tower stood on the main road near the Adventurers Association. The shape of the tower resembled that of a colossal sword piercing through the clouds. It had more than 10 stories and was completely encased in metal. There were few structures of comparable height in the entire city of steel. There were layers of surrounding walls outside the tower, and adventurers in Holy Sword uniforms patrolled the gate. That was the starting point for the Holy Sword adventurers. At that moment, 2 carriages came from the outside and stopped in front of the adventurer team. A few people got out of the first carriage quickly. The first person was Blake, who was carrying Clyde on his shoulder. Clyde's aura was significantly weaker than when he was at the Adventurers Association. A white cloth was wrapped around his mouth, and a rope bound his body. He had ceased to struggle. Additionally, a couple of adventurers rode with Blake in the first carriage. After those adventurers got out of the carriage, they walked to the next one and knelt on one knee respectfully. "Lady Swordmistress, we have arrived." Christina pulled the carriage's curtains open and exited expressionlessly. Her boots made a loud sound as they tapped on the ground. "Lady Swordmistress, should I send Claude to an ordinary member's lounge or our underground prison?" Blake had carried Claude toward Christina as she exited the carriage and asked that question. Christina had said that she wanted to demote Claude from the vice-captain position to an ordinary member when they were in the Adventurers Association. He knew that she would always keep her word. It was impossible to change her decision, especially one she made in front of so many people. "Send him to the common staff lounge. After all, we did not manage to rope that boy into our team, so we don't need to punish him anymore. It's a pity that we almost succeeded. Lady Swordmistress, there's something I don't understand. May I ask?" Blake hesitated for a while when he saw Christina still seemed regretful when she mentioned Watson, but he dared to ask. "What's the matter? Since you want that boy, Watson, to become our vice-captain, why did you hold back when you attacked him? Are you afraid of hurting him?" Blake had that doubt from the start. However, he did not ask about it at the Adventurers Association. If Christina had feared that Watson would get hurt, she would not have suggested that arrangement. If she had held back after agreeing to that test, was it not putting the cart before the horse? As for Christina's decision to appoint Watson as vice-captain, he did feel strange about it. Watson possessed considerable strength. He had sent Claude flying pretty easily, and it was not an easy feat. He must be a silver equals tier elite, if not a gold tier 1. It was really commendable that he achieved that at such a young age. However, that was not why she wanted him as the vice-captain. One could take Claude as an example. If he had not rushed into things head first and caused conflict with the other adventurer teams to establish his authority, he would still be the Holy Sword's vice-captain. Christina did not make things up when she mentioned the Holy Sword adventurer team's creed. Virtue took precedence over talent. That was also one of the reasons the swordswoman was popular among adventurers. "Blake, did you really think I hold back just now?" Christina did not answer Blake's question, but she asked him a question in return. "You mean, you didn't hold back? How is that possible?" Blake was shocked. Christina was a platinum tier elite, and the weapon in her hand was the rare platinum tier weapon in the kingdom, the sky-severing blade. The sword was a platinum tier weapon that the late king had used when he founded the Holy Dragon Kingdom. At that time, there were 4 particularly powerful platinum tier weapons in the kingdom: the dark elemental weapon, the sky-severing blade, the world shield armor, the eternal rising amulet jewelry, and the pen of truth. Other than the pen of truth, which the royal family had always controlled, the other 3 tools were given to great nobles and elites who had made significant contributions to the kingdom. The sky-severing blade had been given to the Sword Saint's family. The sky-severing blade was powerful enough by itself. Still, in Christina's hands, its unleashed power was not something that not even an ordinary platinum-tier elite would not be able to withstand. The result was the same if they had used a defensive skill, but Watson had not done anything at all. Perhaps he had done something that the naked eye could not see, or maybe he was not even a young man. He could be an elite who had lived for a very long time, albeit he had looked very young. Blake deemed that acceptable. Christina turned her head and gazed in the direction of the Adventurers Association just as his thoughts were running wild. Why not? You should know that 2 of our members approached me before I visited the Adventurers Association and informed me that something weird had occurred in the maze. I know. The number of changes in the maze has increased several times over the past few years. Many of our members have seen that incident, and the injuries have increased too. I wonder if that has to do with Watson? The 2 members who found me said that when they were exploring the underground maze's 10th floor when they encountered a mutation in the maze and fell into the lower floors. It was about the 14th or 15th floor where they encountered the evil-eyed monster. They should have died there, but a youth named Watson had saved them. Do you know how Watson killed the evil-eyed monster? According to the 2 members, he killed it with only 1 kick. Christina cast a sidelong glance toward Blake. Do you now understand why I want to appoint Watson as our vice captain? Virtue was more important than ability. That was a principle that her father had taught her when she was young. She had always kept it in mind, but when her ability reached a certain level, that point would be shaken. That's impossible, Lady Swordmistress. Are you sure that the 2 members did not exaggerate the truth? Blake exclaimed. He knew about the evil eye monster. It was a gold-tier beast that often appeared on the maze's 14th or 15th floor. Even he would have a headache if he encountered it. It was bizarre for such a monster to appear on the 14th or 15th floor. Due to the large number of people in the Holy Sword Adventurer team and their varying strengths, they were divided into a few teams. Gold-tier experts like him would follow Christina to attack the monsters, while other silver-tier or bronze-tier members would explore the other floors. Generally, adventurers who had only explored the 10th floor were usually considered the weakest team in the Holy Sword Adventurer team. They would only be bronze tier. They would die if they faced the evil eye monster. As for Watson killing the monster with 1 kick, he did not believe it. Even a peak gold tier elite could not kill the beast with 1 kick. At first, I thought that the 2 members were exaggerating or that they were hallucinating during a life or death situation. So, I went to the Adventurers Association to confront him. The outcome was exactly what you saw just now. I did not hold back, and that youth simply deflected my attack. There is just one explanation for this. That young man has platinum tier strength, and he is stronger than me. My father once said that the world is vast, far more than anything we have seen. There are an infinite number of geniuses in the world, and if you want to advance, you must interact with talented individuals continuously. I did not believe that before, so when my father asked me to go to the Royal Academy to study, I rejected him because I was too old. I ran here to challenge the record that he had left behind. Rather than living peacefully with a bunch of mediocre people, I think it would be better to spend more time on cultivation. But now, it seems like my father is right. I've met a youth whose strength far surpasses mine in the City of Steel. I still don't know what the Royal Academy, which has gathered all the geniuses in the country, is like. I used to be proud of being a member of the Sword Saint family, but now it seems like I'm just a frog who doesn't know that the sky is blue. Chapter 278, The 100th Floor Target. Blake sank into a long silence after listening to Christina talking to herself. After a brief pause, he asked tentatively, "So Watson is a platinum tier elite?" "That's right," Christina laughed self-deprecatingly. "What surprises me the most is not his strength, but the fact that he survived my strike without a single scratch. Yet, he purposely stated that I was showing him mercy as if he wanted me to help him conceal his real strength. He even wanted to assert that he was at the silver tier. It's hard to imagine that someone would be so low-key after mastering powerful strength. Perhaps that is the difference between a true expert and me. A true master would always have the heart of an apprentice." That was what Christina had discovered after speaking with Watson. She was not an arrogant person, but she occasionally desired to show off herself. For instance, she went to the City of Steel to form the world's largest adventurer team and challenge her father's record in the labyrinth. She even asked Claude to contact the Adventurers Association to raise their team's level immediately after she advanced to the platinum tier. "Blake, I hope you won't tell anyone about what I just said," Christina instructed Blake. She had changed her mind. "I understand, Lady Swordmistress. You don't want others to know about Watson's strength so that it will be easier to rope him in, right?" "No, I won't do that. I can't go back on my word. However, I didn't say that I couldn't meet him by chance. Send someone to monitor Watson's whereabouts and activities daily. Inform me of everything. Christina's lips curled into a proud smile. It had the playfulness of a young girl, transforming her cold face into a floral bloom. I might bump into him accidentally while he was eating. We can discuss cultivation matters then. And I can even meet him in the labyrinth, and we can exchange pointers then. That should be fine, right? Blake was taken aback by Christina's smile. He had been with her for a very long time, but it was the first time he saw her smile like that. He regained his composure and looked at her with a sour smile. Yes, Lady Swordmistress, I understand. I'll send someone to monitor Watson later. Oh, right, don't forget to send compensation to the Adventurers Association, Christine said. Don't worry, Lady Swordmistress. I won't forget it. Achoo, achoo. Watson rubbed his nose and sneezed twice. Why do I feel a sudden chill on my body? It's strange. It's not even cold. He had been gone for an hour since he left the Adventurers Association. He was walking down the main street in the City of Steel. There were walkways on both sides of the rock-paved road, and a barrier blocked rows of stores alongside the road. It was not quite as bustling as Mount Creation, but it was still fairly vibrant. He was surrounded by hundreds of adventurers from various teams when he had left the Adventurers Association. Those individuals made urgent attempts to recruit him. Fortunately, he was smart enough to pretend to board the carriage and leapt out of it halfway through the journey. Additionally, he requested that Antonio cast a spell to impersonate him as Nightingale drove the carriage away. They will return shortly, Watson muttered in hushed tones. Denise and a couple of Blood Rose team members followed behind him. Denise remained silent, but the Blood Rose Adventurer team was extremely busy. Ever since he had obtained the gold tier nameplate for the team, the other Blood Rose Adventurer team members had also changed their nameplates. They held it in their hands, they could not even put it down. Annie would even kiss it from time to time. Then, she would put it away and look around to see if anyone had noticed her behavior. She had to be cautious because word had spread like wildfire that Watson had fought the Sword Mistress and won. Watson's ears were constantly filled with news about him as he strolled down the road. Did you hear? A teenager named Watson was recently involved in a fight with the Sword Mistress at the Adventurers Association. She maintained her power at the silver tier, but the young man did not even dodge it. A random passerby had discussed that with his friend. You must have heard different news. I heard that the young man was a gold tier warrior who managed to block Lady Swordmistress's gold tier sword attack. He even managed to obtain a gold tier nameplate for his team. Oh, right, I remember that the young man had joined the Blood Rose Adventurer team. I'm really envious of them. They were only an ordinary bronze adventurer team before today, but now, they've made it to the top. The passerby's companion spoke, revealing an expression of envy and loathing. I heard that quite a few adventurer teams are trying to get that young man to join their adventurer team. We can't let the other teams get ahead of us. Please let us know immediately if you see any information about that young man and the Blood Rose Adventurer team. Our adventurer team will reward you handsomely. More individuals were sifting through the crowd, looking for traces of Watson. Young Master Watson, it is because of you that the Blood Rose has grown as a renowned adventurer team in the city. My dream is to see our team reach the gold tier. Not only have I realized my dream, but I have surpassed it. Thank you so much. Henny hid from the crowd and whispered to Watson. Many people in the city only knew Watson's name. They had never seen anyone from the Blood Rose Adventurer team. Therefore, no one could recognize them on the streets for the time being. It's all thanks to you, young Master Watson. Even a steady man like Clyde had reached into his arms and caressed the gold tier nameplate. There was a wretched smile on his face. Sigh. While an advancement to the gold tier team is a positive development, it is also a negative development. Even if they didn't recognize me, I am certain they would focus their attention on me. Alex sighed. Arthur, stop being so smug. If you're not willing to enjoy that kind of treatment, then you can just quit the team, right? Annie snorted coldly, and Arthur was immediately displeased. Who said I'm leaving the team, Annie? I'm just objectively evaluating the disadvantages of being famous. I did not say that only famous people have some disadvantages. Are you deliberately picking on me? You're the one who has gone too far. Young Master Watson was the reason you could advance to the gold tier. Even young Master Watson did not say anything, so why do you need to know? Arthur and Annie's argument became increasingly loud. It rapidly drew the attention of a few passing motorists. Clyde rushed to halt them. "Both of you, lower your voices. What if someone hears you?" Arthur and Annie looked at each other coldly. They knew that Clyde's words made sense. Then, they separated. Annie came to Watson's side and smiled sweetly. "Young Master Watson, let's ignore that fool. What are we going to do next? It's not easy for us to become a gold-tier adventurer team. Why don't we go out and celebrate later? Didn't you say that you wanted to go to the Golden Quill Pavilion? That's good too. I need to find a place to rest and talk to you about the plans for our team in the next few days." Watson thought for a moment before he nodded. He was a little tired after rushing all the way to the City of Steel. It was also better to inform Nightingale to meet them at the Golden Quill Pavilion instead of looking for them on the street. "That is also acceptable. I need to find a spot to rest and communicate with you about the adventurous team's intentions for the following few days." Watson paused for a moment before nodding. He was simply exhausted after rushing all the way to the City of Steel. It was preferable to inform Nightingale that they would meet them later at the Golden Feathered Garment Pavilion than seek them out on the street. "What plan? Are you taking us down the maze?" "As long as we have you with us, young Master Watson, we can definitely get down to the 40th or 50th floor," Annie replied casually. "No, I am not going to the 40th or 50th floor. I am going to the 100th floor." "The 100th floor? Well, with your strength, it's not impossible," Annie responded habitually. Suddenly, she realized that something was wrong and widened her eyes in disbelief. "Wait, young Master Watson, how many floors did you say?" 100th floor? Did I hear wrongly?" Chapter 279. Give me your clothes. My goal is to conquer the labyrinth's 100th floor. "What's wrong with that?" Watson asked, perplexed. He was confused as to why Annie appeared shocked. It was not only Annie, but even Clyde and the others stopped in their tracks when they heard his comments. As an outsider, young Master Watson, you may be unaware of how terrifying the underground maze's 100th floor is. Even the City of Steel's strongest Holy Sword adventurer team has only been to the 70th floor, let alone the other teams. "It's not a place any human would want to go," Arthur stated. "They had almost died on the maze's 10th floor. Would not they not only be courting death if they went to the 100th floor? Not to mention the monsters that attacked them. They would crumble if the creatures in the maze's depths even blew air on them. I know that conquering the 100th floor will be challenging, but I have you guys, right? I will help you in increasing your strength. This way, you can help me when we get to the labyrinth," Watson said with a smile. He did not say anything about the fusion system. He could fuse any magical beasts in the maze that were weaker than him. He wanted to help increase their strength to boost their survival rate. He did not want them to die from any accident. "Please pardon my candor, young Master Watson. Regardless of how much we improve, the distance between our strength and the 100th level is not insignificant," Clyde said helplessly. The 100th floor was something that they did not even dare to dream about. Their greatest wish was to clear the 40th to 50th floor and obtain high-tier magical beast materials to sell. After all, in the 400 years of the existence of the maze, only the Sword Saint had cleared it. Apart from Christina, the Sword Mistress, no one would be able to clear the 100th floor. Christina had the ability to clear it because she was powerful, and she had a strong team. Furthermore, they had more people, so they might have enough strength to do it. "Young Master Watson, look. The Golden Quill Pavilion is not far ahead. Let's take a break first and discuss that topic when we have time," Annie said as she pointed to a courtyard in the distance with a golden canopy. Additionally, she felt that Watson's words at the time were somewhat implausible. Perhaps he was confused from a blow from Christina's attack. He could rest at the Golden Quill Pavilion for a while. Maybe Watson would not say that after regaining his composure. "Then let's go to the Golden Quill Pavilion to rest first." Seeing that the people from the Blood Roses did not believe him, Watson did not continue speaking. He felt that facts spoke louder than words. He would personally prove to the people of the Blood Roses that what he said was true. Watson stopped speaking when he realized that the folks from the Blood Rose team did not believe him. He believed that facts were more persuasive than words. He would personally demonstrate to them that his words were real. The Golden Quill Pavilion stood in the heart of the City of Steel. It was unlike the majority of the city's houses, which were entirely covered in solid metal. The pavilion had several courtyards, the majority of which were constructed entirely of wood. Besides the trees, there were also flower beds planted around them. A faint sound of water flowing could be heard there, and a soft golden rainbow had emerged in the air due to the water vapor reacting with sunlight. That was also the inspiration for the Golden Quill Pavilion's name. One could say that the Golden Quill Pavilion was the only quiet place in that energetic city frequented by adventurers with powerful auras. Hello guests, may I know if you want to enter the Golden Quill Pavilion? If so, please show me your identification tags. Instead of burly guards, two beautiful girls in long robes guarded the Golden Quill Pavilion. Their voices were like the spring breeze that could soothe one's soul. I can only show you a part of my identification tags. Annie coughed and pulled her collar wide open, revealing half of the golden identification tags on her back. A touch of gold entered the two maids' eyes. Oh, a gold-tier adventurer. Please come in. The girls smiled warmly. Their initial professional smiles were to welcome the guests. The next one was from the bottom of their hearts. After Annie showed her identity nameplate, they were led to the courtyard's deepest part, a spacious pavilion with 2 floors, each 5 meters high. There were no windows on the second floor. The wind came from all directions of the 10-meter-high pavilion. It was a beautiful sight. After all, a gold-tier adventurer was at the top of everyone's list in the City of Steel. After the maid led them into the Golden Quill Pavilion, she gave Watson and the others a brief introduction of the various things in the pavilion. Then, she left the room and said, "There are 2 most famous places in the Golden Quill Pavilion. One is the Golden Quill scenery in the sky, and the other is our hot spring. Our hot spring originates from an underground mineral vein, which contains rich energy elements. Not only can it eliminate fatigue, but it also has a great effect on cultivation. At the same time, a special maid will be at the hot spring to satisfy all the guests' requirements." All requirements? Does that include all services? Arthur, who was lying on a big soft bed, jumped up when he heard the maid's words. "Yes, sir. They will satisfy your every request." The maid smiled meaningfully. Then, Arthur said before he rushed out, "Take me there. I've fought in the underground city for a whole day today and even met with danger. My back is aching now. I should go and soak in the hot spring too. After all, that hot spring can help people improve their strength, and strength is essential to adventurers." After sitting in the room for a while, Clyde got up with a cough and pretended to leave the room solemnly. Closely following behind him was Leon, who did not say much on the way. He quietly got up and walked out. In the end, before he could walk out, he was stopped by Annie. Leon was close behind him, but he did not say anything. He rose and walked out quietly. Finally, Annie intervened and stopped him. "Hey, Leon, where are you going?" I'm going to the toilet." "Really? Then how long will you be gone?" "I have to say a prayer after that, so, about 1 to 2 hours. Then, Leon walked out of the room. In an instant, only Watson, Annie, and Denise remained in the spacious room. Annie twisted her lips when her 3 male teammates vanished. "You may do that if you choose to do so. Why do you have to find excuses? As expected, men are all bad." She suddenly snapped back to her senses and quickly looked at Watson. "Young Master Watson, of course, I'm not talking about you. You're different from them. By the way, young Master Watson, do you want to take a shower too?" "Perhaps later," Watson replied with some embarrassment. He had wanted to experience the hot spring and the maid's services. After all, Capella and Wendy were the ones who helped him take a shower at home. He wanted to see how the service there would compare to the service at home, but he was too embarrassed to go. "Young Master Watson is different from ordinary men, indeed. You are powerful and have good manners. I heard that you are a noble from the border. If I stopped being an adventurer, can I be a maid in your mansion?" she asked tentatively. She felt that Watson was so outstanding, and she also thought that he was the border count's son. He might have high requirements for a maid. However, she did not expect Watson to say, "Of course, you are welcome at the border at any time." "Really? I thought I would need to have a certain level of strength to be your maid." A look of excitement appeared in Annie's eyes. When Denise saw that, she shook her head discreetly. A girl would only have that light in her eyes when she was interested in someone. "If you want to be my maid, there is a requirement for your strength, indeed. But don't worry, I have a way to increase your strength quickly." "Really? This again, young Master Watson?" Annie's face contorted with disbelief. How could there be such a good thing that could allow someone to improve their strength rapidly? You don't believe me? Watson smiled meaningfully and stretched his right hand toward Annie. I'll prove it to you now. But before that, you must give me your clothes. Annie was stunned for a few seconds before her face flushed red. She hugged her shoulders and moved backward. Young Master Watson, you. What are you going to do to me? Chapter 280. The Eternal Holy Fire Armor. Annie's hand gripping her shoulders trembled slightly. Her face, which had been exposed to the sun and wind for the entirety of the year, was flushed with redness. She bit her lips lightly. She thought that Watson was different from other men, so he did not go to the hot spring for the maid services. However, it seemed like Watson chose not to go because he liked her. Otherwise, why would he ask for her clothes? However, was it not weird to do that in broad daylight? What would happen if Arthur and the others returned? Annie was in a dilemma. Her teary eyes looked at Watson's young and handsome face. Ever since Watson rescued her from the underground maze, she had developed a slight fondness for the young man. When Claude from the Holy Sword Adventurer team bullied her at the Adventurers Association, Watson had stood up for her. Those two incidents were enough to tug at her heartstrings. Young Master Watson, if it's you, I can accept it. Please be gentle with me. Annie closed her eyes and pulled her hands away from her shoulders, taking the initiative to approach Watson. Simultaneously, his voice rang in her ears. Don't worry, I'll be very gentle. Annie's heart skipped a beat when she heard that voice. However, the touch she had anticipated did not materialize. Instead, her body grew lighter, compelling her to open her eyes. She recognized that the wizard robe she wore and her leather armor had appeared in Watson's hands, but her clothes were still intact. Young Master Watson, what are you? She was accustomed to wearing a layer of leather armor between her clothes and her mage robe since she was a mage adventurer. The leather armor was not as thick and heavy as ordinary armor, but it could protect the mage's weak body. Her leather armor was bronze tier, and she had spent a lot of money to buy it. Didn't I say that I would help you increase your strength? Part of your strength comes from yourself, and the other part comes from the tools, Watson explained as he rubbed the rings that hung all over his hand. I want to make a wish. I want to obtain 2 of the same bronze tier leather armor. The price is to use up the bronze tier leather armor in front of me. Whoosh! The leather armor in front of Watson was instantaneously cut in half by a blaze of light. Then, he made another wish. He made 10 wishes, and the leather armor in front of him shifted from 1 to 2 to 4. It was stacked into a heap of leather armor the size of a small hill. There were about 1,000 of them. Young Master Watson didn't want me to take off my clothes to do that to me. He wanted to upgrade my equipment. I've misjudged him. Annie's cheeks reddened rapidly. Before she could be bashful, her gaze was drawn to the surplus of leather armors that Watson had created with the wish for the world ring. Why has my leather armor multiplied? What sort of enchantment is this? Then, Watson snapped his fingers and said, System Fusion. The pile of bronze leather armor immediately turned into a light and disappeared as they merged with each other. Congratulations, Master. You have fused 1,000 pieces of bronze leather armor. You have obtained a peak gold tier armor, the Eternal Holy Fire Armor. Gold tier item. The Eternal Holy Fire Armor. Effects. Able to block attacks from gold tier elites and gain immunity to high tier fire attributes. Additional effects. Holy Fire, leather armor that burns with undying flames, and when casting fire elemental spells, grants 100% increase in power. Flame feathered clothing, leather armor that burns with flames and can change its shape on its own to form feathered clothing that can block damages or fire feathers that can cause damages. Auto repair. When the armor is damaged, it will automatically repair itself. Undying bird. When the host is injured, the armor can take damages in place of the host, but that effect can only be used once. Additional ability. Phoenix Strike, can temporarily consume all the flames on the host's body and releases a powerful phoenix to attack the enemy. Watson nodded in pleasure as he examined the fused armor. He could fuse a platinum tier armor for Annie if he wanted to, but those items were extremely rare in the kingdom. With Annie's strength, she would attract unwanted attention if she possessed such an item. Is that a gold tier armor? Annie rose from the ground, her eyes reflecting the leather armor in front of her. Initially, her leather armor was brown and was fashioned from the skin of some magical beast. Apart from enhancing its defensive strength, it would also increase her casting and movement speed, so it had very little effect. However, the leather armor that appeared in front of her was golden red. The red tone was embossed with fascinating golden patterns. It seemed to be opulent and enormous. Additionally, the gold-tier leather armor had been decorated in dense golden patterns that resembled wings. She could spread her arms and transform them into flaming red wings. That's right, it's a gold-tier armor. It's also my gift to you. Do you like it? Watson smiled and pushed the armor toward Annie. I like it, I really like it. Annie's eyes widened as she shouted inwardly. She had not believed Watson when he said that he would help her increase her strength. However, she changed her mind. She believed him. He had waved his hand and duplicated 1,000 of her armor, and with another wave, he had merged them. How could there be such a simple method to create a gold-tier item? Annie extended her right hand subconsciously toward the gleaming leather armor in front of her. She instantly shrank back as she approached it. I apologize, young Master Watson. Even though I adore that gift, it is far too precious. I can't accept it. Miss Annie, please accept this gift. It is nothing to young Master Watson. Watson did not say anything. The one who spoke was Denise, who was standing behind him. Watson nodded. That's right, I have too many similar items at home. He was right. There were so many resources on Mount Creation that they were piled into the sky. However, those words sounded different in Annie's ears. Was the border count so wealthy that his house is brimming with gold-tier items? But didn't they say that the border is the poorest region in the kingdom? Annie did not refuse the gift when she considered Watson's magical method for making gold-tier armor and with what he had just said. She reached out with a trembling hand and put on the gold-tier leather armor. The moment her skin touched the gold-tier leather armor, it immediately stuck to her body. The wing-shaped flames that shot out from the leather armor's shoulders retracted to form a red robe on the surface of her body. That robe was made of fire, and it had the shape of a stack of feathers. If one did not look carefully, one would not be able to tell if the clothes were flames or real feathers. Annie looked at the gorgeous feather robe on her body, and her lips trembled in excitement. The moment she put on the armor, the way to use it appeared in her mind. Whether it was the attributes of the leather armor or its gorgeous appearance, they were far beyond her expectations. Not bad, it looks pretty good. Now that you have a weapon, I just need to increase your strength. Watson clapped his hands. What level are you planning to raise me to, young Master Watson? Annie knew that Watson would be able to increase her strength after she saw his skills in creating the gold-tier leather armor. She was hopeful. Perhaps Watson had a way to let her advance to the silver tier? While Annie was making bold estimates in her heart, she noticed Watson rubbing his chin and said, "It's a little too exaggerated to upgrade you from bronze to platinum tier. Why don't I upgrade you to gold tier? It would match your armor. I believe you will be able to protect yourself in the depths of the dungeon." Chapter 281. I'd rather be an idiot. At the hot spring in Golden Quill Pavilion, a few men moaned comfortably in the hot spring that was filled with water vapor. Golden Quill Pavilion is truly a paradise. Our adventurer team was only bronze tier. They would only put us at the furthest point whenever we come here, let alone the hot spring. And they would serve us simple food too. Now that we've achieved the gold tier adventurer status, they let these special ladies serve us. Arthur sat in the hot spring, his body wrapped in a modest towel. Behind him, a lovely maid was scrubbing his back diligently. Clyde and Leon were also in the hot spring near him. They nodded in accord as they heard his words. It's all thanks to young Master Watson. Our treatment in the Golden Quill Pavilion in the City of Steel has changed. With young Master Watson on our team, we will improve even more in the future. We should drink to our heart's content and celebrate properly. A few maids surrounded Clyde. They knelt on their knees and gently massaged his tall and sturdy body with their tiny hands. Honorable Mr. Clyde, the wine you requested has arrived. This is the top quality red wine that the Golden Quill Pavilion has prepared for the few gold tier adventurers. A maid entered from outside the hot spring shortly after Clyde's voice faded. She held a tray in her hand that had a bottle of red wine. It looked exquisitely packed. That scene led the three men to sigh once again at the service provided by the Golden Quill Pavilion. Let's drink to a beautiful tomorrow together. Speaking of the team's future, do you still remember what young Master Watson said about clearing the maze's 100th floor? Arthur raised his glass and spoke as the maid distributed glasses of wine to everyone there. Clyde and Leon nodded. They also raised their glasses and took a sip. Leon said, "Arthur, what do you want to say?" "Even though our team has become better because of young Master Watson, he will occasionally say some unrealistic promises. How is it possible to go so deep into the maze's 100th floor underground? He also said that he wants to improve our strength and let us help him. Only that foolish woman, Annie, would believe such words. Since she hasn't come out after such a long time, young Master Watson must have entangled himself with her. She's here at the Golden Feather Pavilion, but she can't enjoy it. What a pity. Yes, what a pity." Clyde and Leon glanced at the beautiful maid, whose clothes were exposed. They could not help but swallow their saliva. Perhaps it was the alcohol, but they felt as though their body's blood circulation had increased significantly. They might each take a handmaiden and get a room with them after their soak in the hot spring. As adventurers, particularly low-tier adventurers like them, they were frequently under pressure to take risks. Seeking out ladies to accompany them was a very natural way for them to relieve stress. Since they had a female member in the team, they typically conducted such activities in secret. However, they could do so freely in the Golden Quill Pavilion. The service and ladies there were superior to those they had encountered previously. The most important thing was that the pavilion had preferential treatment for gold-tier adventurers. They did not even need to spend any money. Arthur, Leon, and Clyde smiled lewdly when they realized they could embrace those plump bodies dripped with fragrance and freely frolic with them later. They felt as if they were in heaven, but they pitied Annie, who could not come out to enjoy herself. A slightly disgusted female voice suddenly echoed from outside the hot spring just as they thought about that. "I heard some disgusting sounds from a distance from the hot spring." "It was you guys, indeed. I won't say anything about you, Arthur. This is your usual dirty self. But Captain, Leon, why are you behaving like this? Especially you, Leon. Aren't you a devout priest? Can your God forgive you for such an act?" Annie materialized at the hot spring's edge. Her silhouette was obscured by the white mist from the hot spring. They could not see her clearly. "Annie, what are you talking about? Who's dirty? Speak clearly, you." Arthur was the first to react when he heard Annie's words. He held a wine glass in one hand and gripped a towel around his waist in the other as he left the hot spring in Annie's direction with a displeased expression. He finally saw Annie clearly after halfway toward her. His jaw dropped as he stood frozen on the spot. He was so shocked that the wine glass in his hand fell to the ground. "Arthur, what's wrong with you? You looked scared. Is Annie not wearing any clothes? Annie, since you're here, you should enjoy yourself. There are beautiful maids and handsome male servants here." Clyde stood up and walked out of the hot spring. When he reached the same spot as Arthur, he stopped as his face exhibited an incredulous expression. Finally, Leon said, "Annie, Captain is right. The God of light that I believe in also said that long-term abstinence is not a good thing. It's better to enjoy yourself here than to be forced to chat in the room." He walked toward Annie. Then, he had the same expression as Arthur and Clyde. Annie was not naked. Instead, it was her clothing that astounded them. Annie stood in front of them, hands on her hips. She was dressed in a fiery red feather coat that fell to her feet. The feathers around her neck were particularly thick, and a scarf shaped like two wings fluttered on both sides of Annie's body, giving her the appearance of a fire goddess. Apart from the clothing on her body, Annie had changed as well. Annie had been the weakest member of the Blood Rose adventurer team. She was an ordinary bronze tier mage, compared to them, who were already at the peak of bronze tier. However, Annie had changed. She radiated an incomprehensible and overwhelming aura, rendering the three men incapable of guessing her exact strength. However, it was evident that she had beyond bronze tier. "Annie, what happened? Where did you get that armor? And how did you get stronger so suddenly? Are you a silver tier mage now?" Clyde was the first to react, and he could not help but ask in surprise. A mage's training entailed an understanding of the world's magical elements and strengthening the connection between the soul and magic. Some mages could immediately grasp certain world views. It was not uncommon for their strength to increase exponentially, and he believed it was very likely the case with Annie. To his surprise, Annie shook her head. "Captain Clyde, you've misunderstood. I did not advance to silver tier. I am now gold tier. I am now a gold tier mage. My armor, including the increase in my strength, was made possible because of young Master Watson. Annie's face was flushed with pride as she spoke. She cast a glance at her three companions, who were becoming increasingly shocked, and she smiled. Watson had fulfilled his promise to help her to advance to gold tier. She had managed to propel from bronze to gold tier in a single step. Even though she had no idea how Watson did it, the surge of energy coursing through her body assured her that all she had experienced was real. Thus, after expressing gratitude to Watson, she proceeded to the hot spring. She was ready to inform Clyde and the other two men about the situation so that they could seek Watson's help in increasing their strength. However, before she reached the hot spring, she heard the three men criticizing her with her sharp hearing. They said that she did not know how to enjoy herself and was an idiot. They even laughed at her for listening to Watson's nonsense. She was unhappy when she heard those words. However, the idiot they mentioned had transformed into a powerful gold tier mage. She even had gold tier equipment on her. Well, she would prefer to be an incurable idiot if that was what it took to reach her progress. Chapter 282. Too late for regrets. Annie, did young Master Watson help you achieve that? Quickly, tell me how he did it. Clyde asked anxiously. He already regretted his decision. If he had known that staying by Watson's side would really increase his strength, he would not have gone to the hot spring. He was particularly taken aback when he noticed the flames on Annie's body and the magnificent feathers radiating high temperatures. He felt much more miserable when he considered how he might have obtained one too. I'm not sure how young Master Watson did it. I just saw him use the leather armor that I took off and cast a spell to duplicate it into thousands of pieces. Then, they were fused and turned into the armor that I'm wearing now. As for the method to increase my strength, it's even simpler. Young Master Watson picked an iron tier medicinal herb by the roadside and used the same method to fuse it into a gold tier herb for me. After I ate it, I immediately became a gold tier mage, Annie said softly as she placed her finger on her lips and recalled the scene just now. Is she for real? The three of them looked at each other, their eyes filled with disbelief. Annie said that the armor was replicated and then fused into a stronger one. Then, she said that Watson had picked a random herb and turned it into gold tier medicine for her to consume, after which she had advanced to the gold tier. If it had been that easy, the gold tier adventurers in the City of Steel would not be famed as the top adventurers. Do you not believe me? It doesn't matter. I can prove it to you. It was as if she could read their minds. Annie chuckled and took a step forward. Boom! There was no sound but a colossal aura spread from Annie's body. Then, she stretched her right index finger and said, Bronze tier fire elemental spell, exploding fireball. The symbol of a gold tier mage was concurrent spells. The spell, which initially required a lengthy incantation, appeared in Annie's hand instantly. Furthermore, compared to the spell that she had cast before, at that moment, the explosive fireball was much larger and more powerful. The massive fireball, which was half the size of a house, floated above Annie's head. The hot temperature instantly reduced the amount of water in the hot spring by 1/10, and even the hard rocky ground began to turn red and hot. It made Clyde and the others grimace in pain. That's enough, Annie. We believe that you've become a gold tier mage. Put away that spell, Clyde shouted as he hugged his feet. Whether it was the spell's strength or the aura emitted from Annie's body, she was undoubtedly a gold tier mage. At that moment, if the spell in Annie's hand had landed on the Golden Quill Pavilion, it would be enough to blow it up. After he finished speaking, Annie extinguished the exploding fireball. Annie, you've really advanced to gold tier. That is too surreal. Arthur sat on the ground of the gradually cooling hot spring, rubbing the blisters that had burned the soles of his feet. In the beginning, when young Master Watson said he would help me to become a gold tier mage, I did not dare to believe it either. However, that is the truth. On the other hand, none of you believed young Master Watson's words. You guys are having a lot of fun here. Initially, I wanted to tell you to ask young Master Watson to increase your strength. But perhaps you should stay here and let these maids serve you. I'll look for young Master Watson myself and see if I can increase my strength further. Annie snorted coldly and turned around to leave, but Clyde and the others refused to let her go after hearing her statements. Annie, please do not leave yet. We've worked hard all day and have come here to unwind. Who said we don't believe in young Master Watson's words? Clyde smiled with an awkward expression. Really? When I arrived here, I overheard someone say that young Master Watson's words are implausible and that such words would sway only a foolish woman like myself. Who made that assertion? Arthur's attitude shifted as Annie's voice grew faded. He was the one who had said those things. Clyde also frowned as he looked at Arthur. Arthur, how can you do that? We owe a debt to young Master Watson. If you don't believe me, then forget it. Why did you say it out loud? You fabricated lies about young Master Watson on purpose. Why aren't you apologizing? Clyde hurriedly turned his head to look at Annie and said, Annie, those were Arthur's words. It has nothing to do with me. Take me to young Master Watson, please. I wish to increase my strength and get a complete set of gold tier equipment. Arthur was so angry that his lips trembled. He stretched his hand outward and pointed at Clyde, not knowing what to say. Clyde was far too despicable. He had thrown Arthur under the bus because he wanted Watson's help. However, he could understand Clyde. If there were a chance he could become a gold tier elite, he would also disregard everything else. Captain, don't say things like that. You were the one who told me to stay here and enjoy myself. You also said to find me a male servant. Annie pointed the spear at Clyde, who stuttered, I. After a while, Annie looked at Leon. And you, Leon, you agreed with the captain's words just now. You even said that enjoying yourself here is better than talking to young Master Watson. You even said that it was the doctrine left behind by the god you believe in, right? Leon's face flushed red as he lowered his head. It's not that I don't want you to look for young Master Watson. But, just look at all of you. What right do you have to ask young Master Watson to help you improve your strength? If it were me, I would definitely feel embarrassed. The men could not raise their heads, they were ashamed. Then, Annie sighed, but young Master Watson is a generous person. If you go over there now and apologize properly, perhaps he would be willing to help you. Really? When they heard those words, all three of their eyes lit up simultaneously, and they raced out without saying a word. A maid, who was responsible for serving them at the hot spring, asked, Dear adventurers, are you sure you don't want to stay here and continue to enjoy our service? Beautiful women were insignificant when compared to the prospect for them to advance to gold tier. Captain, don't get changed so quickly. Wait for me. Arthur, you still have the nerve to talk about others. Aren't you changing your clothes quickly too? Captain Clyde and Arthur, I don't care if you wear your clothes fast or slow. But can I trouble you not to wear my clothes? Clyde and Arthur fought to change their clothes in the locker room, regardless of whose clothes were in their hands. Leon complained in dissatisfaction as he squeezed his way into the room. The three men were in a mess. Annie, outside the locker room, was speechless. At the same time, in the top level of the Holy Sword Adventurer team's office. Lady Swordmistress, you asked me to investigate the whereabouts of the boy named Watson. I have some news for you. Blake knelt on one knee and spoke respectfully to the beautiful girl whose back was toward him. The girl stood in front of a huge French window, enjoying the scenery of the entire city of steel. Then, she turned around nervously. Is that so? Tell me where he is. Even though everyone is saying that the Blood Rose members left by carriage, and that carriage was seen on many streets, I think they are trying to trick us. Get to the point. Watson's is at the Golden Quill Pavilion. Our spy there reported that they saw them enter the building. Boom. A muffled sound was heard immediately after Blake finished speaking. Christina's French window shattered, and many sword energies spilled outward. Christina had transformed into a giant bird and leapt from the window, vanishing into the skies. Only Blake remained in the room. He rushed to the window, gazed down at the panicked street mob, and sighed with his hand on his brow. I know that the sword mistress thinks highly of Watson, but I haven't told her where he is in the Golden Feather Pavilion. Why is she in such a hurry? Chapter 283. A romantic encounter in the hot spring. At the Golden Quill Pavilion. Young Master Watson, we did not believe you when you said that you would help us increase our strength. It's our ignorance. Please forge a set of gold equipment for each of us and increase our strength to gold. The three of them knelt in front of Watson in the room. Watson was holding a teacup in his hand. He looked at the three people in front of him who were half-dressed. Their sleeves were hanging off their body, and their pants were on inside out. He did not know whether to laugh or to cry. Annie stood behind the three of them. She hugged her shoulders and said coldly, Are the three of you asking for young Master Watson's help? I'm sorry, young Master Watson. We know we're in the wrong. We won't talk about you behind your back anymore. We won't sneak out to enjoy ourselves anymore. If you help us improve our strength, we'll follow you down to the 100th or 200th floor of the maze. It doesn't even matter if we die there." Then, the three of them kowtowed with a face full of regret. "There's no need for that. I have no intention of restricting you from having fun. After all, you are here to enjoy yourself. As for helping you to increase your strength, I will definitely do what I said." As he put down the empty teacup, he gestured for Denise to add some tea leaves for him. Then, Watson waved his hand at the three people in front of him. "Really, young Master Watson, you are a good person." As he felt their gazes, Watson said, "Don't be too happy yet. Even though I said I would help you increase your strength, I've already used up my wishes today. Therefore, I'm afraid that you won't be able to increase your strength." "How could that be?" The light in the men's eyes instantly dimmed. They subconsciously looked at Annie. Their eyes pleaded with her. If they could restrain their inner desires or be like Annie and trusted in Watson's words, they would have become a gold-tier elite, not Annie. They were driven mad with envy when they saw Annie, who had been the weakest member of the team. Annie ignored them. She turned around and said, "Serves you right. Of course, it's not like there's no way out." At that moment, Watson interjected. His words lifted their mood. They cursed in their hearts. If Watson had a way out, he could have said it earlier. They had worried for nothing, thinking that they had missed a great opportunity. "I can help you improve your abilities, but you must give me enough equipment and medicinal herbs. The amount of improvement depends on the number of materials you can give me. Don't worry, young Master Watson. We'll go to our homes here in the City of Steel to get the weapons and medicinal herbs for you. We'll bring everything we have with us." The three of them ran outside hurriedly. They had been adventurers in the City of Steel for many years. They were not rich, but they had a certain amount of savings, including a home in the City of Steel. They decided to offer the weapons and medicinal herbs they have and all the valuable things in their home. They did not even plan to keep their house if they could advance to gold tier. If that were not enough, they would borrow money from other people. After they thought about that, the three men rushed out of the room in a few seconds. Many passers-by looked at them strangely because of their odd appearance. "I haven't finished speaking. Why did they leave so fast?" Watson looked at Annie. "Miss Annie, please catch up to those three and tell them. Regardless of whether they can gather the necessary materials or not, I plan to increase their strength either way. Don't tell other people, or I won't help any of you." "Understood, young Master Watson. I'll go and inform them right away." Annie nodded as she chased after them. "Young Master Watson, is that a good idea? Even if they are very tight-lipped, if someone wanted to investigate this, they would still discover the secret to their increase in strength," Denise asked worriedly after Clyde and the rest had left. "It doesn't matter. In any case, I won't be staying in this city for too long. As long as I can hold on for some time, it will be enough. Furthermore, compared to raiding the underground city by myself, their help will minimize the risk. If someone still wants to target me, I'll accept it." Watson shrugged. Then, Denise nodded. She thought his words made sense. She said, "Let's not talk about that for now." Miss Nightingale sent a message saying that she and Master Antonio had completed their mission and had gotten rid of all the stalkers. "They're on their way here. They'll probably arrive in a few minutes. Tell Nightingale to go to the hot spring to find me. Clyde and the others are not here, so I'm going to take a good bath. Denise, are you going? I want to discuss the next arrangements after Master Antonio comes back, so I'll pass." 10 minutes later, in the hot spring. Watson sat alone in the hot spring. He was surrounded by mist. He stretched his arms and leaned his head against the rock beside the hot spring. Comfortable. There were no other maids in the hot spring. He did not like to be stared at by strangers while he took a bath, so he dismissed them. Although the maids looked very pitiful before they left, he did not show them any mercy. "Nightingale will come in a few minutes. I'll give her a good scare." He had not planned to bring any maids with him, but Sylvan insisted he brought Nightingale along. The young woman had worked tirelessly as a coachman and helped him complete his mission, which made him feel a little guilty. He had mixed feelings about Nightingale. She was the assassin who had once tried to kill him, the Black Moon Knight's first teacher and his friend. In addition, he had some special feelings for her. Without a doubt, Nightingale was an important person to Watson. He did not like to be served by the people from the Golden Quill Pavilion, but he would not dislike it if Nightingale served him. It was better to say that he hoped that Nightingale would return soon. Nightingale is so slow. Watson rolled his eyes and thought of a good idea. He removed his clothes from the hot spring, pinched his nose, and sank into the pool in the hot spring. He was a Platinum Tier elite and had mastered the Water Elemental Combat Aura. He could hold his breath in the water for a few days and still be okay. Sure enough, it's best to soak in the hot spring alone, Christina muttered to herself as she took off her clothes and looked at her plump body in front of a mirror in the changing room. Her figure was well proportioned, and every muscle in her arms and thighs was full of strength because of her years of training. It feels like my breasts have grown bigger again. Reaching out her hand to support the two round spheres in front of her chest, Christina showed a somewhat distressed expression. As a female swordsman, having too big a chest would affect her speed and balance. If she continued to develop, she would have to use a corset. Christina looked somewhat distressed as she extended her hand to support her breasts. Huge bosoms might impair her speed and balance as a swordswoman. If they continued to grow, she would need to wear a corset. With that thought in mind, she observed herself in the mirror a few more times before she wrapped herself in a towel and walked toward the hot spring. Before she went there, she had confirmed that none of the maids were there. The hot spring was reserved for the gold tier elites, so very few people could use it except for Christina. She was confident it would be empty. She was a woman, so she loved to pamper herself. Christina looked around the area when she walked into the hot spring and saw no clothes or aura. She sighed in relief as she removed the towel from her body. As a new Platinum Tier elite, her 5 senses were so sharp that she could detect any movement within a few hundred meters. She had searched about 100 meters of the surrounding area, but there was no one around. She loved the quiet atmosphere very much. Naked, Christina slid into the hot spring. Her hands and swan-like neck were stretched and leaned against the edge of the bath. At that moment, her toes seemed to have touched something. An electric current passed through her body. Who's there? Chapter 284, A Fierce Battle. Watson pinched his nose and dived into the hot spring. He reached out and touched the pearly white feet, which immediately shrank back as if they were electrocuted. He found it funny, thinking that Nightingale was too sensitive. Who's there? At that moment, a woman's voice echoed from above Watson's head. It reached the water through the surface. His face changed because the voice did not sound like Nightingale's. At the same time, he found another strange thing. Nightingale did not seem to be wearing any clothes. Her smooth feet were connected to her round and smooth calves. On top of that, her plump thighs were crossed, and one could vaguely see her perky buttocks. It was not just the towel. The woman did not even wear any underwear, which made Watson feel a little incredulous. If that were Nightingale, she would be embarrassed to see him without any clothes on. If it were not Nightingale, who was that person? Was it the maid who he had dismissed? Watson was puzzled and was about to rush out of the hot spring when a terrible force suddenly fell from above his head. It was a sharp sword aura that wanted to cut the entire hot spring and him. Christina's face was red when she raised her right hand and hacked furiously at the hot spring, aiming at a faint shadow beneath it. When she entered the hot spring, she looked around and discovered that it was deserted. However, she felt someone touch her feet after entering the bat. She initially thought it was an illusion, but a peculiar sensation on her feet made her realize something was amiss. She concentrated her efforts on probing the surface of the water and discovered a person lurking in the hot spring. However, she could not see who it was. She trembled in anger. Who dares to ambush me as I soak in the hot spring? Whoever you are, D*MN pervert, go to hell. Christina's physique radiated a brilliant light elemental combat aura as she spoke. It wrapped around her and transformed into a warm, luminous robe that concealed her bare body. The entire hot spring was ripped open by her sword aura, revealing Watson's form below. You? Christina's face contorted as she looked at the youth who had appeared in front of her and realized it was the person she would look for later. Her gaze became sharper, and the corners of her mouth twisted into a smile. She was there to find a way to put Watson's strength to the test and spar with him. Even if the setting was a little awkward as they had met at the hot spring, it was still a fantastic chance. After all, she did not require an excuse to fight. What brings you here, Miss Christina? Watson realized who it was when he stood up. It was Christina. He also had a surprised expression on his face. At the time, Christina had used a light elemental combat aura to cover her body. Even though it covered most of her flesh, one could still see her plump contour through the soft light. Watson did not think much before he realized that Christina's sword aura had already arrived in front of him. That sword aura was not as powerful as Christina's attack on him in the Adventurers Association during the day, but he was not wearing platinum tier armor at the moment. As a result, Watson elected to employ the diamond tier absolute defense spell in response to that attack. A protective barrier in the shape of a semi-transparent polygon appeared on his body with a swoosh. A hexagonal seal was used to create each protective barrier. When the sword aura made contact with the shield, it made a faint sound and was instantly repelled. Watson, when I saw you at the Adventurers Association, I thought of you as a young and promising adventurer. I did not expect you to be a pervert. You deliberately waited here to ambush me and even peeked at my body. You're quite bold. Christina thought she was right when she saw Watson parry the sword aura she had casually discharged. Watson was a platinum tier elite, yet he pretended to snort coldly. Indeed, Christina was unconcerned that someone had seen her nakken, believing that a person's body was merely a skin. It was irrelevant whether it was attractive or not. What mattered was whether that body could develop into a razor-sharp weapon as she became stronger. Miss Christina, you've misunderstood me. I did not mean to peek at you. I was lying in ambush, but I did not expect you to be here, Watson explained helplessly. He felt very aggrieved. He had planned to ambush Nightingale, but who could have guessed that the Holy Sword Adventurer team's captain had appeared instead? Furthermore, she was naked. He wondered why the maids did not inform him. Watson had transmigrated to the world in the body of a 10-year-old boy, and he was 12 years old then. He had lost his indifference to matters between men and women. He recalled the scene where he saw Christina bathed naked in the hot spring. He noticed how his nostrils had burned, and a trace of bright red liquid began to flow. He was suffocating in the hot spring. Dribble, misunderstanding? Why would your nose bleed if it were a misunderstanding? Additionally, you said that you intended to ambush someone here. Do you believe that attacking ladies is okay regardless of who you ambush? Then, Christina spread out her dazzling combat aura wings on her back and shouted softly, Light Elemental Law of Domain, activate. A vast, bright domain materialized beneath her feet. One of the simple-looking thin swords landed in Christina's hand. The domain's thin sword was very similar to the sky-severing weapon she employed during the day. Watson, don't think that I will let you off easily after doing such a thing. Copy the sky-severing blade and attack. If Christina did not mind it just now, she felt a little embarrassed when she saw Watson's nose bled as if he was reminiscing about something. She controlled the law domain and attacked Watson. The power of that sword attack was not inferior to the one she had used during the day. The sword aura pierced through the entire hot spring and flew straight into the sky. The hot spring's rocky ground was cut open, and the clouds in the sky were also broken. Dark Elemental Law of Domain, activate. Watson could only stomp his feet as he realized Christina had no intention of stopping. A vast dark world appeared beneath his feet, the polar opposite of the brilliant domain beneath Christina's. Watson waved his hand to activate the pitch-black domain, and a ball of pitch-black fog wriggled out of the realm. It transformed into a black sword blade in his hand and swept out, easily dispelling Christina's sword aura. That attack was just an ordinary attack, but it was on par with Christina's. Over the past 2 years, he had been receiving guidance from Elvira, Nightingale, and other warriors on Mount Creation. He had trained hard, and that effort was not in vain. I did not expect you to be not only a platinum tier elite but also to have a dark combat aura. It seems like we are natural enemies. In that case, I don't need to hold back. The two opposing domains clashed. Obviously, the domain under Christina's feet had fallen into a disadvantage, constantly cracking and even collapsing. However, she did not care at all. Instead, her eyes were burning with a desire to fight. She extended her right hand and clenched it fiercely toward Watson. The next move is the strongest move I have mastered so far. The heart is the bone of the sword, and the sword forges the body. That body is perched atop Sword Hill. Platinum tier combat technique, infinite sword slash. The light domain beneath Christina's feet gleamed brightly as she moved. Each light weapon assumed the form of a sky-severing blade. At the same time, Hundreds of sky-severing blades ascended into the sky, transforming into shooting stars. Their might shook the entire world. Chapter 285. Nightingale's Misunderstanding. The domain under Watson's feet could have suppressed Christina, but after she used a platinum-tier battle technique, the dark elemental domain of darkness beneath his feet was instantly compressed and then collapsed with a heavy sound. His expression revealed a trace of surprise. That was his first encounter with such a lethal sword style. Its power and range were not weaker than spells of the same level. That was the swordsmanship of an expert swordswoman. It was so powerful. Watson wondered if he could learn a similar sword technique after reaching the kingdom and becoming a grand swordmaster's disciple. Watson sighed inwardly. At the same time, he raised his hands toward Christina. "Miss Christina, let's talk. We don't have to fight. I can explain what happened just now. I won't listen to any of your explanations unless you defeat me," Christina replied coldly, commanding the meteors to fall as they sailed into the sky. Those meteors were made of invisible sword aura. In comparison to real meteors, the sword aura's strength and speed were more horrifying, even more so when they were descending from the sky. The power contained in those sky-severing blade copies was much stronger. If those blades were to fall on the ground, they would riddle the earth with holes. Christina panted slightly after the attack. Sweat dripped from her forehead. It was apparent that that move had not been easy for her. Her gaze was locked onto Watson, wanting to see how he would resolve that move. You can only discover your own shortcomings in a battle with an elite. Come on, Watson, it's rare for me to unleash my full strength. Don't disappoint me. Watson sighed. If it's possible, I really don't want to fight. Miss Christina, you just said that as long as I defeat you, you'll listen to my explanation. Don't go back on your word. Watson looked up at the sky. Hundreds of sky-severing blades had already surrounded him. The ground under his feet had sunk several inches. It had been cut out of shape. There were also marks on his body. It seemed like his flesh was cut too. He felt as if his entire body would be hacked in the next moment. Absolute seal. Then, Watson released the diamond-tier spell that he had learned. The rule for the spell was made when he fused the law of domain with magic. It could suck out all the magical elements within 100 meters around him. The moment he released the absolute seal spell, the sky-severing blade copies around his body disappeared one by one, turning into tiny specks of light that fused into the air. It was one of the strongest platinum-tier sword attacks, but it was nothing to him. That's the second time that my sword aura has been dissolved so easily, right? Christina frowned. She would not be shocked if Watson employed a defensive tactic or launched a forceful attack to thwart her attack, but Watson made no such move. The sword aura she slashed forth instantly vanished from Watson's body. It was extremely similar to the predicament she encountered when she attacked Watson during the day. She wondered if Watson had some form of special magic that could disable his opponent's attacks. Since combat aura attacks are not effective, what about close combat? Christina did not believe that Watson's magic could eliminate her combat aura and physical attacks simultaneously. Her entire body turned into a blazing light. She transformed into a continuous flash of light and bounced around Watson, filling the air with a burning smell. Often, she would step on the ground in the surrounding walls with her bare feet, and she would be able to bounce far away. It was an element's body. It was an ability that only a peak gold tier warrior would be able to comprehend when they reached the threshold of platinum tier. It was also a rudimentary law of domain form. That move did not turn the surrounding space into a domain with specific attributes. Instead, it turned one's body into an element. The disadvantage was that it reduced the power and range of the attack. The advantage was that it was more flexible and unexpected. If he were an ordinary peak gold tier warrior, at Christina's pace, he would probably have already collapsed on the ground due to dizziness, foaming at the mouth. Watson, it appears it would be quite difficult for me to be your adversary if I were to face you directly. However, my most outstanding aspect is not my strength but my speed. You cannot attack me at this pace, but I can attack you indefinitely. How are you going to fight against me? Miss Christina, please don't jump around. My head is dizzy. Watson shook his head. The moment he did that, Christina turned around speedily and rushed in his direction. Christina shifted her path more than 10 times in midair, and a brilliant flash of lightning flashed past Watson's side. Platinum tier fighting technique, chaotic divine joy dance. Hundreds of fake Christina appeared simultaneously in midair. Each of them was executing the unique move as if they were each other's original bodies. Layers upon layers of phantoms sped past Watson's side, totally enveloping his body. The sonic boom shook the entire courtyard. It was quicker than the speed of sound. Confronted with the layers of dizzying phantoms surrounding him, Watson casually extended his palm to one of them and flicked it lightly. Pow! The phantoms that had taken over the sky vanished. Christina took a couple of steps backward, holding her right chest. She collapsed on the ground, her face contorted with embarrassment and disbelief. Watson's finger had flicked across the sensitive area of her right chest when a great force entered her body, numbing the entire left half of her body. She had no way of knowing if Watson had done it deliberately. That was not the main point of her thoughts. The main point was that because she had mastered the light elemental combat aura, her speed was faster than other people of the same level. Even an average platinum tier warrior would not be as fast as her. In addition, she had trained her physique all year round. Her fastest speed could reach several times the speed of sound, but Watson had easily found her real body. Did that not mean Watson was even quicker than her? How could that be possible? Light elemental combat aura was the fastest element, and the dark elemental combat aura that Watson had mastered was only slightly more bizarre. Watson, how did you discover my main body? You kept up with my speed? Christina asked the question in her heart. That's right, Miss Christina. I don't only have a dark elemental combat aura, I can also use light elements to create combat auras. Then, a huge light elemental domain appeared beneath his feet. The aura emitted by each weapon was stronger than that of the sky-severing blade. After that, the light under Watson's feet dissipated, and Christina was in a daze. She had become a platinum-tier elite at such a young age. Furthermore, she had also mastered the two most challenging combat aura elements. The fact that she had learned the light and dark elemental combat aura simultaneously was enough to be praised as a peerless genius. The only person in the kingdom who could do that was her father, the Sword Saint. When he realized that Christina was intimidated, Watson walked up to her and extended his right hand. Miss Christina, my strongest ability is not in combat because I am a platinum-tier mage. Do you still want to continue fighting? Those words were like a bomb, setting off huge waves in Christina's heart. A mage used a warrior's ability to defeat me? The corners of Christina's mouth twitched, and her expression seemed strange. She did not doubt Watson's words at all. A youth with such strength had to hide it on purpose. There was no need to make that up to deceive her. However, that fact was a little too depressing. Watson, you've won. It's my loss. I won't bother you about what happened just now. Christina hesitated for a moment and sighed. She knew that if she continued to fight, she would only bring humiliation upon herself. It was better to go back and digest the insights gained from that battle before looking for another chance to fight Watson. Her impression of Watson had changed. One could see a person's character through a battle. Watson did not take the opportunity to touch her during the battle, except when he touched her chest. That was an accident. After defeating her, Watson extended his hand toward her in a gentlemanly manner. If an ordinary man saw that, he would definitely covet her body. She was still very confident in her charm. Watson's ambush in the hot spring must have been a joke, Christina thought to herself. If it were true, she envied the woman that Watson had targeted. She must not be an ordinary woman if she could make Watson pay so much attention to her. After learning Watson's true strength, she wished she could bring him back to the Holy Sword Adventurer team and let him accompany her for training every day. She even wanted to let Watson join her in conquering the dungeon. With his help, she would have no problem conquering the maze's 100th level. With that thought, she reached out and grabbed Watson's hand to pull herself up. However, the numbness in her body had not faded yet. She slid off her feet. With a cry of surprise, she subconsciously grabbed the thing closest to her. Arg! Christina fell to the ground, staring blankly at a white towel in her hand. A dangling thing appeared in front of her, turning her expression from white to green. Then, she let out a piercing scream. No! Suddenly, a black shadow rushed into the hot spring. It was Nightingale, who looked furious. Young Master Watson, what are you doing? Who is this woman? What is your relationship with her? Watson looked down at his naked crotch and then turned to look at Nightingale, who was sweating profusely and had obviously just returned. He looked like he had nothing to live for. Nightingale, This is not a good time for your return.